Let's jump right into this explainer on the psychology behind personal growth. I want you to picture this as vividly as you can. You are having a genuinely terrible day. You just got your midterm paper back in a class you actually really care about, and boom, C+. You're stressed, you're disappointed, and to top the whole thing off, you walk outside to find a bright yellow parking ticket just glaring at you from your windshield. So you call your best friend a vent, and they basically just brush you off. Ouch, right?
So, how do you process all of that? Does a day like that make you feel like a total reject? Does it make you want to just crawl back into bed? Or maybe yell at a stranger? It really comes down to a foundational question. When do you actually feel smart? Do you only feel smart when you're flawless, when everything comes easily and perfectly? Or do you feel smart when you're actively learning, stretching yourself, and figuring out something incredibly difficult? Decades ago, researcher Dr. Dweck was absolutely obsessed with this idea of how people cope with failure. She gave a series of increasingly difficult puzzles to school children, fully expecting them to either cope with the failure or just give up. But what she didn't expect was this. Confronted with a genuinely hard puzzle, one 10-year-old boy pulled up his chair, rubbed his hands together, smacked his lips, and literally shouted with absolute joy, "I love a challenge." No way, right? Instead of being crushed by not being able to solve it immediately, he was thrilled. He didn't even think he was failing. He thought he was learning. And that brings us to section 1, the two mindsets. Because that little boy's reaction, it completely opened the door to two totally different psychological worlds. The first world is built on what we call the fixed mindset. This is the belief that your traits, like your intelligence, your personality, or your creative talent, are just carved in stone. You're dealt a hand, and well, that's it. If you're operating in this mindset, your entire life becomes this all-consuming race to constantly prove yourself. Every single situation is an evaluation. Will I look smart or dumb? Am I a winner or a loser? It is exhausting, honestly, because you can never just be. You're on this constant treadmill to prove you aren't somehow deficient. Now, the second world is the growth mindset. Over here, you believe that your basic qualities are things you can actually cultivate. The hand you're dealt at birth, that is merely the starting line for your development. Now, this doesn't mean anyone can just magically wake up and be Einstein, but it means a person's true potential is unknown and, frankly, unknowable. It's this incredibly hopeful belief that you can always change and grow through application, experience, and finding the right strategies. Notice how the core motivations of these two worlds are totally at odds. The fixed mindset is absolutely obsessed with proving yourself. It demands instant perfection to validate your worth. But the growth mindset? It is all about improving yourself. It thrives on stretching your abilities, especially when things aren't going well. Okay, moving on to section 2, the meaning of failure, because these two psychological states literally redefine what failure actually means in our lives. The absolutely crucial point here is the difference between failure as an identity versus failure as an action. In a fixed mindset, failure morphs from an action you took into an identity you wear. You don't just fail a test, you are a failure. It becomes this permanent, haunting trauma that completely dictates your self-worth. But in a growth mindset, failure is just an action. It's a painful problem for sure, but it's just a problem to be faced, dealt with, and ultimately learned from. It does not define who you are. To put this into perspective, take the incredible story of former NFL player Jim Marshall. Playing for the Minnesota Vikings, Marshall scooped up a fumble and sprinted for a touchdown. The crowd is going wild. The only problem, he ran the wrong way. He literally scored for the opposing team on national television. It was a devastating, humiliating mistake. But instead of letting it permanently define him as a failure, he told himself, if you make a mistake, you gotta make it right. He pulled himself together for the second half and played some of the absolute best football of his entire life, ultimately helping his team win the game. He took control of the failure and used it as fuel. But dealing with failure naturally brings us to section 3, the truth about effort. We really need to unpack some of the deeply ingrained and, quite frankly, toxic myths we all hold about trying hard. Society often feeds us this idea that natural, effortless accomplishment is the ultimate goal. If you have a fixed mindset, you buy into this. You believe that if you have to try hard, it must mean you aren't naturally talented. Effort is seen as a huge risk because it robs you of your excuses. But for a growth-minded individual, effort isn't a sign of weakness at all. It's the very engine of accomplishment. It's the exact thing that makes you smart or talented in the first place. And this brings up a really fascinating concept, the prodigy's fear. Take the violin prodigy Nadia Salerno-Sonnenberg. She arrived at Juilliard with awful playing habits, but she absolutely refused to put in the effort to change them. Why? Well, because she was paralyzed by the prodigy's fear. What if I try my absolute hardest and it's still not good enough? See, if she didn't try, she could always fall back on, well, I could have been great. But if she gave it her all and failed, she'd have zero excuses left. It actually took her teacher threatening to kick her out to finally make her commit to the hard work. Now, as these concepts have spread like wildfire, a pretty dangerous misunderstanding has popped up. Let's transition to Section 4, the false growth mindset. And we're going to burst the bubble on what this actually entails, because a lot of people get this completely wrong. A true growth mindset is not just walking around claiming you're open-minded or flexible. And it is certainly not that slightly annoying participation trophy idea of just praising effort without any actual progress or learning attached to it. Listen, just trying hard and failing repeatedly without changing your tactics, that isn't growth. And it's not just passively telling kids, hey, you can do anything, without actually giving them the skills and resources to get there. A true growth mindset requires tying hard work directly to learning, utilizing new strategies, and making tangible, measurable progress. So how do we actually move from psychological theory into actionable reality? Let's look at Section 5, Your Journey to Growth, where we'll lay out a personal roadmap for cultivating your own development. We're going to walk through this kind of hero's journey together, and step 1 is actually surprisingly comforting. You just have to embrace your fixed mindset. Actually, scratch that. It's more like accepting it. We are all a mixture of both mindsets. Acknowledging that you have a fixed mindset lurking inside you isn't something to be ashamed of. It's quite literally the required starting line. Step 2 is paying really close attention to your triggers. When exactly do those defensive, failure-avoidant feelings flare up for you? Is it when you receive highly specific constructive criticism? Is it when you're staring down a massive looming deadline? Or maybe it's when someone else succeeds and you suddenly feel a little threatened. You've got to recognize the exact moments your fixed mindset tries to grab the steering wheel. Now, step 3 sounds a little quirky, I'll admit, but it is a highly effective psychological technique. Personification. Name your fixed mindset persona. Give it a name, like Dwayne or Karen. By giving it a name, you actually separate this limiting, judgmental voice from your true identity and potential. It turns into this slightly absurd character you can interact with, rather than an absolute truth that you just have to blindly believe. And finally, step 4. When Dwayne shows up to warn you against taking a risk, or starts beating you up over a setback, whatever you do, don't suppress him. Invite him along. Educate your persona. Consciously say out loud, look, Dwayne, I know you're just trying to protect me from feeling dumb right now, but we are going to try this new strategy anyway. You teach that persona how to view setbacks not as the end of the world, but as necessary stepping stones. Which brings us to our final thought. The psychology behind personal growth isn't just some neat concept you learn once and forget. It's a daily practice you have to master. As baseball star Alex Rodriguez pointed out when talking about success, you never stay the same. You either go one way or the other. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Which direction will you actively choose today? Are you going to protect your ego? Or will you stretch your potential to see what you're truly capable of?